The Australian Parliament has passed a bill granting police powers to access suspects' social media accounts and even control them. Authorities will now be able to modify and delete even suspects' data and hack their devices, all without having to seek a judge's approval first. They say the powers are needed, though, to fight terrorism and child exploitation, much of which is conducted online. But critics stress that the new bill makes Australian police the judge, the jury, even executioner, while, for instance, in the UK and the US, no such powers have been granted. At the same time, there's also been discussion about the possibility of introducing ID checks for users on social media and dating apps. Australians may be asked, for instance, to answer a 100-point questionnaire before setting up an account, essentially putting an end then to anonymity on the internet for many. The suggestion was also aimed at tackling online abuse. It didn't get its way into the current bill. We got some reaction, though, from these unprecedented powers now being given to the police, and what was thought about them.
I believe that people should be identifiable relatively quickly and relatively straightforwardly should they do something which harms others. Things like that are always useful to investigations and to investigative officers because communication between individuals is usually a key part of that investigation and evidentially very important.
This is clearly a police haven. Police needs to do no more. We call it fascism, really, because this is where the government is effectively controlling the media. In this case, social media or the internet.
The source of the problem is that social media and internet communication has moved on leaps and bounds, and legislation hasn't kept up with it. Probably because legislation simply cannot move that fast, and communication technology has moved at an incredible speed, light speed, over the last few decades. And so problems have arisen where legitimate interests of the state, legitimate interests of the courts, legitimate interests of others have failed to provide sufficient ways into internet communications, and so that's lagged behind the times.
The reality is that in nearly all cases we are able to unravel the ID of people. People use email addresses and credit cards, and they pay for things, and it is nearly always possible to find out who they are, no matter where they are in the world. And this is the job of the police. Yes, the police will need to work a little bit and do a little bit of digging and do a little bit of investigation in order. Now you cannot incriminate an entire nation.
In practice, people can be anonymous on the internet and get up to all sorts of criminal activity, causing all sorts of harm, with the states and judicial bodies having no practical way of getting behind that. And so that is the harm that needs to be addressed. But the balance has to be struck where there are sufficient safeguards to make sure that the police aren't doing it on spec, as it were, and they've got proper grounds for it. And so those things do take time. So it's getting the balance right.
Remember, the governments will take as much power as they possibly can. And this is what the Australian government is doing now. They are just taking as much power as they possibly can because they can.
Elsewhere, Ireland's data regulator has slapped the WhatsApp messaging service with a record €225 million fine for breaching EU data privacy laws. That fine relates to a probe that launched in 2018, questioning the transparency of the company's privacy policies. They included the way users' data was processed and clarity over how rules are applied on the platform. The Commission calls the violations very serious. In return, Facebook-owned WhatsApp says it disagrees with the decision.
All phone infringements are, in my view, very serious in nature. They go to the heart of the general principle of transparency and the fundamental right of the individual to protection of his/her personal data.
We have worked to ensure the information we provide is transparent and comprehensive, and will continue to do so. We disagree with the decision today regarding the transparency we provided to people in 2018, and the penalties are entirely disproportionate.
And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed.